On that note, with Charles, I just wanted to pull up something here and maybe get your guys' thoughts on this. Is, Charles tweeted this out this morning, just a couple hours ago, and he says, while things are always in motion, I can safely say it's never been more true than these last 5 months. And that stood out to me because it feels like, with everything happening, it kind of feels like something's happened all of a sudden. But I think this has kind of been building for quite a while. And I mean, he mentions that he's been receiving death threats, which is unfortunate.
Not cool.
Yeah, not cool. But says we'll all end up in an amazing place. But clearly, the president of the governing board and stuff putting something out like this, knowing how how tied down a lot of these folks can be by legal or whatever it might be. I was really curious to kind of see like how you guys potentially read into that post by Charles and maybe kind of what you're inferring from feedback you're getting or signals you're getting. Maybe Tom, I'll go to you first, but I'm curious to kind of see how you read into that a little bit.
Yeah, I want to say, I think maybe the first conversation that I had with Charles was, he was, asking what have he thought about the community survey, and I said I think that's going to be great. And I said, but the critically important part of doing any sort of community survey is don't just do a poll, don't just take comments. There needs to be something actionable that comes out of them because otherwise the community is just going to lose faith. And so I said, well, you have their attention, you have their engagement. There just has to be follow through to that. And and I can say that I just did my debrief follow up interview with one of the dev advocates at Swirls Labs. That's basically assisting Charles in assembling all of that. And the follow up questions were very, very specific. They got into things like what type of support mechanisms are required for the community, right? What do your devs need to succeed? Was sort of the lead off pieces, and then on the other side it was let's talk about the perceptions of retail versus enterprise, and that was sort of the other big theme of the follow up interview. And again, from my perspective, being somebody that's actually been, a startup entrepreneur that's also been that spent time in a Fortune 500 company, my response there was, success for any marketplace requires, all of the above, right? You can't just be focused on enterprise. You can't just be focused on retail. There needs to be balance, and that balance is very delicate, right? Because perception means a lot. So if that you're pumping a lot of tokens through grants into enterprise because they're just churning out they're churning out TPS, that's fine. But then there needs to be very, very important amount of grant money also flowing into retail to be able to support that. But moreover, you know, there needs to be sort of that social media follow-up component, right? You can't just say, "Hey, look at TPS, look at what Atma's doing." There also needs to be, let's talk about the features in Hashpack, and let's talk about how we've been able to basically start up and build a wallet that can compete with a MetaMask or a Phantom, right? So let's talk about that. We don't see that type of spotlight on the retail community. We don't see a focus on, let's take a look at Hashport and let's talk about why this bridge is superior in many ways to other bridges that exist on other chains, and why we'd like to focus from a native services perspective. So again, we need to have these types of promotions, if you will, of our retail ecosystem and the mechanism of this has to be a way so that this information is reaching all of Web3, not just the people that follow Hedera, because most of their followers are enterprise focused.
Right.
Right.
And maybe,
I mean,
Dave, same question to you after kind of seeing that tweet from Charles and kind of reading into it a little bit. Where does your head go?
Well, I guess I'm just going to kind of like address that, but I'll also just kind of follow up with what Tom said, which is kind of, to me, it's an organizational structure issue. And to me, the lead should be the Web3 unit should be leading and training and informing everybody else in the industry. It's not the other way around. So if you look at currently what's going on is you've got Swirls, which is doing potentially private stuff and doing, building modules and building things to accelerate the Hedera algorithm, and who knows what's going on because it's not super transparent. But you've got the founders at Swirls. You've got HBAR Foundation. You've got the Hashgraph Association. You've got all these organizations, right, that I don't think they communicate to each other, and I don't think anyone's leading the other one. And so when I talk to Charles and I read Charles, my guess would be if he came from Polygon and Aptos, he's probably interested in trying to coordinate those organizations so it's all under one umbrella and they're all communicating. And just doing that, if we had all the relevant people in this organization on a space once a week where everybody could just vet, you could have people get up and speak and ask questions. And I don't mean like I wasn't a fan of the way the meetings went in the past with the founders where you had to send your questions up front and then they would determine whether or not they're going to answer them or not. I found that to be corporate. That wasn't Web3. No. There's nothing about Web3. When I helped the founders of IOTA launch their token, we were doing everything on a Slack channel. And this is just a funny story because it was like 50,000 people on a Slack channel doing some virtual trading. And the screen was moving so fast because everybody was talking, but the founders and all the members were all answering questions, and it was dynamic. And it was like all the Web3 degens they could talk to the founders, like not send me a question. And because I'm a corporate entity, I'll maybe answer your question. And I've got lawyers that tell me I can't say this and that. That's not Web3. Certainly, a founder could say, I can't answer that, but just don't, that's it. You don't have to say anything more. Just can't answer that and move on to the next question. But if we had spaces, I mean, I'm presenting this, hopefully, I think right now what's happening is there's so much fear of risk from the legal aspects, which I'm calling out as I don't think that's relevant anymore. I think at one time it was. There just needs to be open dialogue, and you put a disclaimer, just like, in the old days, you put a disclaimer and say, this is what we can and can't say. These are forward-looking statements, and then just have an open dialogue. And if someone doesn't want to answer a question, they don't have to, but there needs to be transparency in the level of I would like to see a community space with Swirls, HBAR Foundation, the Hashgraph, instead of all these guys all doing their own thing.
Yeah.
It should be a foundation. And so just in talking, knowing where Charles came from, I would assume he's got a big job ahead of him, and the community can help him to kind of think about how we make this an organization, not a bunch of independent, non-transparent entities, because we all know that just isn't going to work.
Are you suggesting that company. I was going to say, are you suggesting that there could potentially be some kind of because I'm trying to piece together in my mind of, what could it look like when these events shape Hedera? Because I do think that the Hedera community is a lot more powerful than we think. I think that sometimes it definitely feels like people are screaming into the void, just because, to your point, the communication for whatever reason just doesn't flow in the way that it needs to in Web3. There's that disconnect. But what could this potentially result in? I mean, Charles talks about working on something for 5 months. We talk about the structure of these organizations, how they don't communicate to each other, these different things. What you're speaking to is a potential kind of just reorganization of Hedera in a way that it seems like a pretty far out type of thing. But when you actually think about it, It doesn't seem that crazy, but the pathway there seems kind of messy. It's tough to think about, but it kind of makes sense. I mean, it's nothing that hasn't been done before. I mean, Hedera's gone through many transitions. Is there just another chapter coming for Hedera that enters it kind of into maybe a new form in a way? Like, it's something to think about. What are your thoughts on that?
I mean,
Well,
go ahead, Dave.
Tom, go ahead.
All right. So basically, Brandon, I think, first thing I'm going to say is a lot of Hedera's behavior has been shaped by the fact that the LOC went out and set up a Reg A with the SEC, right? So they got a securities exemption. So that was part of, the creation of the SAFs and so I think a lot of people don't understand there are some legal handcuffs that they've basically put on themselves that are different than what exists on other networks and chains. And so that's why, the marketing has always been very muted. And that's why, they've been, very, very careful to ever avoid, conversations about price. It's why they'll never use a rocket emoji, right? So, I mean, these are, this is already the basis of where we're starting. So we've literally already cut the legs out from underneath anything you can do that's very Web3. And then I think the other real challenge that they have is that enterprises are inherently secretive, right? They in my own day job, just to get access to into some new projects, I have to basically go through two tiers of NDAs just to get access to be able to participate and work on a specific project. That level of compartmentalization exists in all of these enterprises that you see on our council. And so and they're bringing a lot of that. They're bringing a lot of that. That those experiences there. But what I think is possible is I don't think we're going to see community projects on the council anytime soon. Maybe we'll get to the point of permission nodes at some point. And then maybe those people on those permission nodes might have some opportunities to sit in on council meetings and basically start training sort of the next generation of governance members. But yeah, in the short term, one of the things that I've actually mentioned to Charles is that from just to take a page out of more of an academic book, but the next time they have a big on-site meeting with all the governing council members in attendance, the first night's cocktail party, let's have 20 ecosystem projects sit in that room, right? So that we know that the GC are meeting those devs and understand what those projects are building, so they get a good sense of what this retail ecosystem is looking like. We're not bringing the community from the retail side and the enterprise side together. There's not been any sort of mechanism. And I'd like to see that happen face to face, because I think that's where an opportunity for real dialogue takes place. But just to get to Dave's point, these curated conversations, these moderated conversations, I love Brandon the Bull. But when he does those spaces for swirls for the HBAR Foundation, they feel curated like the old town hall meetings that Zenobia would run. And so I think we need to basically get to some place where we know that the community members are having a chance to interact with the council members in a way that's going to basically allow for more cross-pollination. I can't imagine that for any of the activities that are going on within the governing council, that they're not going to need a wallet, that they're not going to need some type of microsite marketplace, that they're not going to need some type of token swap capability within the types of dApps that they're thinking about building. Well, why are they not just, drawing from the talent pool that already exists within the network and being able to leverage that? One of the easiest ways to potentially support, ecosystem projects is for them to basically do side deals with the corporations, the governing council. Again, working in a large enterprise, I can tell you, when we need expertise, we don't just go basically try to figure out how to do it ourselves. We go find the people who are the experts, and we basically bring them on as consultants. We bring them on as contractors. That is exactly how enterprise works. But we don't have that right now. The only contractors that have happened were whoever Swirlds basically steered towards the council. So if Swirlds said, okay, you know what, let's go work with these guys LimeChain, or let's go work with this other group. That's the only way any of those types of activities have taken place. But those organizations aren't actually doing anything within the ecosystem. They're not from the ecosystem. And I can tell you, knowing a lot of the devs, and Dave, I think, is a great example, the devs within the retail community are professionals. These are people that have enterprise experience. These are people that have, a wealth of knowledge beyond just, supporting meme coins and and NFTs. So I think the retail community needs to, I would say, let's show a little bit more of an acumen in terms of being professional. We can still question, we can still challenge, but I think it should be done respectfully. Maybe tone down speculation and let's just stick to facts that we know that exist. And again, like we've said before, everything is on the Hashgraph, so we can show the data. And if we focus on that, maybe that gives Charles the ammunition that he needs to say, look, we need to start bringing these people in. We need to basically start curating this information and these relationships as well. And I think that's the underlying theme here, is that there is no relationship. Retail has no relationship with anything outside of the projects who perhaps had a chance to get were fortunate enough to get a grant. But we need to start fostering these relationships, and we need to start building this community, from the inside out.
Really good stuff, Tom. Can I just have a couple of thoughts about this, and how do I get them out correctly? Web3 is about decentralization. It's about peer-to-peer. It's about disconnecting from centralized everything, right? It's about somewhat semi-autonomous smart contracts. And so if you look at the theme there, if I was a corporation and I was looking at a new industry, a disruptive industry that's changing, that's completely different than the version before it organizationally, I wouldn't necessarily be looking at the organization and saying, if I'm going to build a 100-year company, it needs to look like it did 10 years ago. I'd be thinking, what's the new structure organizationally that goes with the technology? And so I don't believe this idea that because it was a really good strategy in the beginning to build a governing council here and do this, that it shouldn't be restructured. And because I'm in, being an entrepreneur and building companies from scratch to selling them, any plan I created always was adapting and changing, and there was never any you could just put and you see this all the time where people reorganize, they restructure, they rebrand,
Sure. Yeah.
even put new logos. So I don't understand where this fear of, just because we set it up this way, it's a 100-year company. How can you even know what a 100-year company is going to look like if you're not going to adapt it, for one? I have no idea how you even say that. So yeah, it comes across as a little critical, but why can't we just be adaptive, and why can't we just change, and why can't we just do some bolder things and say, okay, we're restructuring this. To me, if you don't have a DAO that represents the community, you cannot even call it a Web3 company, because DAOs are in play. No one knows how it's all going to play out, but the concept of a distributed autonomous organization is moving slowly towards a more decentralized organizational structure. And there isn't really a lot of good examples of ones that have succeeded. But look, we're only 5 years into this. So I think now is the time to play around with those concepts and start integrating. And to me, transparency just means that all these individual organizations need to listen to the community, for one. And the easiest way you could do it is just have weekly spaces. Now, if the lawyers say you can't do that, I'd say fire the lawyers. I'm sorry. If there's any lawyers on this channel watching me, and that's what you're saying, people can't talk to each other because that's more important than actually building a company of value, I'm not buying it. And look, and I get there's NDAs and there's corporate, there's some things. Look, someone, you had mentioned a 506 Reg D. We did that. Our company did it. It's not a big deal. The lawyers will make it seem like it's a big deal, but it's like a $35 application fee to file a Reg D filing. It's not complicated. Okay.
No, I think they're Reg A. I think they're Reg A, actually.
Whatever. They're not that complicated. Okay. It's just not. It's basically registering with the SEC.
Right,
now,
right.
The SEC has changed their tune multiple times since 2017. And so now if you were going out to do one of these things, people are still using SAF structures. But if you look at the recent stuff that's happening politically with, some of the House bills that are getting floated, and the fact that Biden did not veto this last bill, things are being favored towards self-custody. There's a lot in play to me that make it look like the regulators certainly don't know how to do this.
No.
But it's all dynamic is the point. So you can't just put a structure in place in 2017 and say we're locked down and our rules make us do this if you're not adapting to the market. So
that's fair.
Anyway, it's not to say there wasn't valid reasons for the way things were structured. That's not what I'm saying. Mm-hmm. I mean, back in 2017, the legal attorneys were were scaring people pretty badly, and so was the SEC. I think we've evolved, and I think we're moving towards a market where there's going to be resolution of commodities, utilities, securities. I don't necessarily think that projects that are highly decentralized and have made their best efforts to do things right are going to be turned into securities. I don't believe that's going to happen. So
I wanted to just really quick, guys. I just wanted to also kind of just bring voice to like another side of the conversation that, I think is important to recognize. And of your comments, this guy, I think referring to one of you guys, but said everything needs to be combined into one org. It's separate for a reason. It makes them more decentralized. I do think there's that narrative out there that, we don't need to focus on retail. Hedera is special, and we have secret pathways to get to the top 10 or top 5 on coin market cap and avoid all the issues other networks have. And somehow we're far superior to other networks and stuff. And I think that, maybe throwing the question to you guys, and maybe Dave, really quick, I'll just throw it to you, of like, to the person that kind of really disagrees with the notion of Hedera focusing on retail, or just overall in the Hedera, an HBAR that's kind of like, retail doesn't matter, enterprise is going to lead the way, who really kind of just disagrees with a lot of this stuff that, is holding HBAR and is kind of in this ecosystem. What would you say to those types of people that are really kind of have really kind of taken on that enterprise first, enterprise only ethos in the ecosystem?
He's muted.
Oh, there we go.
I'm sorry. I just saw a comment up there about someone that said that I said that it needs to be combined into one org. That's not what I said. I said there needs to be an organizational structure that's Web3 that has transparency and communication between everybody. I don't care if it's 10 different organizations if they're communicating with each other, just to be clear about that. Right now, I don't see communication and transparency between the organizations. And so, but to answer the retail thing, I think if anybody really wants my thoughts on this, I can summarize right now really quickly. But I've done 2 posts in the past couple of days on Twitter where I kind of laid it out, and I think I laid out what as best as I could, why I thought it was important to really have retail as being. I think everybody keeps twisting this into, if you pay attention to retail more, then somehow you're completely blowing up the whole notion that we are focused on large scale enterprise use cases. And I don't think it has to be that way. I think it could easily be 50-50 or 60-40 or whatever. Right now, I don't think it's balanced that way. And I think that the Web3 community, if you go poll people from other projects and ask them what they think of our project, they'll tell you what they'll tell you based on some of the things that I'm telling you. They'll agree with those things, that they just don't think that Hedera cares about the retail community. And I've even had other community members say directly to my posts that retail does not matter. Retail does not matter because when you have 1 trillion transactions, right, it has so much, there's so much revenue generated. And that's a one-off from a startup standpoint. If you're a startup or you're even a VC funding a startup, if you think you know everything from the day one and it's never going to change, and that's just the strategy you're going to pick with, you're probably going to fail. You're going to hit a brick wall.
Yep. And
I'm talking about adaptive thinking. So I'm proposing that they represent retail in a way that the individuals that are supposed to be running the retail side of the organization have. I'd like to see some due diligence done on who those people are and make sure they know exactly how the retail community works. They need to, right now it's unfortunate, but a lot of people don't like crypto, Twitter. They don't like Twitter, for instance, but most of the crypto discussions are going on in Twitter right now. That's where this industry is sharing information. It's a lot of people don't like it, but that's the reality of the rules of how this game is being played. So I would just say, to summarize, I'd say if someone really wants to know my thoughts, read my tweets, because I don't think I have too much variation in that.
Right.
But I'd like to hear what Tom has to say.
Yeah, I mean, I think in general, I think I agree with you. I think the one area where I probably have a slightly different take, and that is, I think DAOs, in theory, are fantastic. In execution, I think they're lacking. And I say this because it all depends on how the voting mechanisms are taking place. Because right now, I think a DAO, Hedera transitioning into a DAO, I think would be more of the same. Because if you look at the token distribution, the SAFs are going to basically have the majority of the voting power anyway, as well as how do you handle the voting? How would you handle the voting with what was remaining in the treasury? So I think that maybe I think a future state where a DAO and community governance of the project is the goal that we work towards. But I think we need to have a roadmap, and we need to basically understand how do we get from current state to that future state. And some things have to happen along that way. And in that regard, I think Dave is basically pointing out exactly what does need to happen, and that is we need to start focusing on decentralization. We need to start focusing on a more proper balance of emphasis and focus. I don't think it hurts Hedera or the council to have a retail focus, because when I sit there and I look at some of the newer council members, are in fact very retail focused, right? I think I did a Twitter analysis at one point, looking at all the council members and looking at them from a perspective of all the early council members were primarily B2B, right? And now we're finally starting to see new council members that are B2C. And I think that's what we need more of, right? We need more B2C level council members, because those corporations at least understand that, in order for them to generate revenue, they have to be working with retail. And so, user counts matter, right? And if user counts matter, liquidity matters, TVL matters, right? That level of peer-to-peer and decentralized transactions that are happening within an ecosystem. Their app may be a silo that maybe does or does not specifically interact with the rest of the ecosystem, because that could be their particular business model. But regardless, they still need to have that that pool of active daily users on a particular network in order for there to be success from a retail perspective. Those are the things the retail community is trying to build. Those are the things that we're trying to emphasize. When use an example, Hashback just put out a tweet that they hit 150,000 wallets created when they integrated the social logins for Magic. For Magic Labs, we just saw Galaxy adopt the Magic Labs wallet for the Galaxy app. And, Galaxy put a lot of their credibility on being built on Hedera. Well, but now their built-in wallet is not just Hedera. It's Hedera, it's Solana, it's Binance Smart Chain, it's Avalanche. It's all 27 different chains that Magic Labs support. So I think that I think that's really telling, that we have to start thinking about how do we start reaching out, how do we start bringing in and getting people exposure, because I can tell you, somebody who's used to using a marketplace on Ethereum or Polygon, probably has had an experience where they thought they were getting a great deal on an NFT, only to have somebody basically snipe that transaction because they saw it in the mempool going, oh wow, that's a Bored Ape that's 10 Ethereum below floor price. No, I'm going to go ahead and snatch that one for myself. So and those things happen all the time, and which has led to people having their own sort of private RPC endpoints and trying to basically shield the mempools so people don't see that. But Hedera Tech takes all that stuff out of the equation, right? So the cost of the transactions are low, right? They're very secure, and basically it's virtually impossible to think about how would you actually front run them. It just makes that retail commerce that much more smooth, and ultimately can also be frictionless. Token association, right? A lot of us get annoyed by token association, but we're not annoyed by the fact that we don't have dusting attacks hitting us all the time. So again, I mean, these are things that these are the things I want to see Hedera focus on. These are the things I want to see them basically talking about, because these are the things that matter to retail. Don't tell me about TPS. Don't tell me about this logo salad that's all the council members. Nobody cares about ABFT if you're talking about other chains, because they have no idea what that means. Focus on the things that matter to them, right? Focus to the things that basically tell them, look, if you put your TVL here, it's going to be more secure than if you're parking your assets somewhere else. Those are the things that matter. So this is, I mean, I'm excited by what Bonzo is doing in terms of Brady over at Bonzo, and basically them bringing an AAVE style lending protocol to Hedera. I think that's going to be incredibly impactful. And even what my team is building at PixFi, just trying to basically to open up NFT marketplaces to as many chains as we possibly can, and then on the back end building more of an NFT DeFi protocol to basically allow people to start extracting value from those things. But these are the things that basically will matter to people in retail on other chains. But we need help getting that message out. I don't have a marketing budget, right? Dave probably does not have a marketing budget, But what we really need is we need the organizations in the middle that have a marketing budget to get that word out for us. How hard is it for them to basically, retweet something, and or promote, or even basically pay for promotions? I don't need a grant, right? But boy, it'd be great if you could basically help us promote our information to, to all the chains that you're talking to, part of the DREC Alliance, for example. That would be perfectly helpful, right? There are small things that they can do for the community to help, where the community can basically help themselves. And I know that, and just to be fair, I know that, there are projects in the ecosystem that feel like they've been left behind because, they weren't the first mover to get that grant. It doesn't mean that they can't also be helped, in smaller ways. So, if the foundation basically wanted to basically, help promote and help spotlight, some stuff that was going on, at H Suite, some stuff that was going on at Kabila, for example, something that was going on at Atlantis, right? So if they wanted to focus on some of these, sort of, what I would call sort of not the primary, but the follow-on applications, all of these things would make the community feel that much more respected, right? And that becomes the foundation that we can build on. But we're not doing that, right? So right now we've got a lot of people shaking fists at their at their phone screens and their computer screens. We're not getting to that next step in terms of where we're talking about what are the things that we can start doing that basically starts building back trust. What are the things we can start doing to be positive, to build the community up, and those are the next steps that we really need to start focusing on. And I'm very hopeful that, especially now that Charles seems to have his Twitter back, maybe we can basically start to rally around, and start identifying what those are. But to Dave's point, I think, it's probably going to have to start with, a really difficult but important, spaces session, where you're going to have Charles, you're going to have Eric, you're going to have Manson Lehman sitting in that room. You're going to have the new CMO for Hedera is going to have to be there, and you're going to have some people from the council, right? So I don't want it moderated. I want everyone basically to be up there on the speaker panel, and people from the community can just come up and ask questions. Right. And I think if we can get started that way, we can basically start to move past, I think, the current state that we're at, and start working and building towards the future that we all want.
Yeah. So on what you're saying, listen to Tom. The reason the DAO was an interesting concept was it's a voice of voting to just get polling for understand what the community is interested in as a way to weight things in decision making. So that's all I meant. Is I don't mean turn it into a DAO. The other thing is that if you look at, like, maybe it's easier just to ask questions. Like if you know what your KPIs are, they're going to get you noticed by the crypto media, by Masari, by Lunar Crush. If there was more emphasis on thinking about holistically from the organization, what does Masari do in their annual report? What do they care about? They care about number of wallets. They care about TVL. They care about RWA. I'm not saying there isn't people talking about this as important, but it needs to be front and center. Those should be the KPIs that are paid address to. And I also think this is the part that's so interesting, is that the community has a lot of really smart people in it that understand this industry. And so to not listen to that voice and act like we're the corporations, we know what's better in a disruptive industry, is just not the way any industry has ever evolved. Listening to the title of this, I don't consider it little guy, but I guess, it's one of the notions. But I'm actually 6'2", so I'm not that small. But I'm just kidding. No, but the idea is, think about KPI. I mean, the question would be, what would drive And the other question that I would have is, it bothers me when being part of this project from very early, that if you look at like a lot of the crypto media that are overlooking us, saying misinformation about us, not really paying attention to us, I would want to know why, and I would want to fix that part, because we are in an industry where it's collaborative. You've got Chainlink trying to connect all the chains together. You've got interoperability being discussed, which is kind of early. But because of that, we would want our brand to be like, we're one of the coolest chains out there. And I give kudos to, Lehman and Mance deciding that we're going to do, that was just fantastic what Lehman did when he decided he was going to take his idea and basically make it look like it's everybody's idea. That was like one of the coolest things I've ever seen, because, this whole DREC alliance.
Yeah.
But at the same time, the media looks at us and is not fair to us. So if we start looking at like becoming really relevant on those KPIs that Messari, I actually read the Messari reports and I look at, and it's hard to get on their radar. But then you go to like Lunar Crush, some people might think, well, who cares what the social imprint is? Well, corporations and investors look at that kind of stuff when they decide. And this is a redundant story, but I was in New York City 2018 when Hedera was launching, and there was a lot of really high net wealth family offices there. And essentially, I was listening to the presentations, and somebody in the audience asked a panel of 3 different very large family offices that were making big Bitcoin and crypto project investments. And they said, what's the most important thing in a DLT, a blockchain project that you invest in? And they said, brand. They said brand and how it's perceived in the market. And then they look at the technology. I just thought that was interesting.
Yeah.
So I've been trying to say that, for years and years, and that my voice has been sort of like, what I've noticed is the community now has kind of shifted from the narrative of, and I don't know if anyone's really said retail doesn't matter, but it's like, the point is, it doesn't matter whether or not someone said it or not. If that's how the perception is in the market from the analysts, the degens, the investors, the institutional investors, the Web3 investors,
everybody,
you want to change that perception, even if you didn't ever say it. It's like, why wouldn't you want to fix that? Right. That's my point.
Yep. No, I mean, perception is reality, right? Especially in our, it's 2024. That's, you can, whatever narrative you want to sell, if you can get people to buy it, then that's the truth. And that's what good marketing does, right? Marketing creates that reality.
Absolutely. And I mean, marketing, geez, we could have a whole other discussion, but